It's worth occasionally reflecting on the power of evil and the power of God, just as we appreciate goodness in contrast to evil. The positive power of God compared to the negative of evil. Actually, won't quite say power, the negativity. But I think actually all power is in the hands of God. But I don't know. And it's extremely helpful to recognize when you do not know. To some extent, that applies to just about everything, probably. We don't know. There's an element of uncertainty, which is the strange freedom we have here, which we value so much, because it enables us to, in a sense, live as we want to, and find out what we value and what we don't. When we come to a contentment with the loveliness of God, our God, when we get to that point, I was going to say we're then ready for heaven, but it's probably that we are experiencing heaven at that point. It defines what heaven is. Buddhist, I think, in some ways tries to achieve this artificially by controlling the mind. God does it by having controlled the experience, our experience. And that brings us to a contentment with him, a love of him. Do I know that all this, in this recording, for instance, is true? I don't know. But I am aware that I seem to be choosing to trust such. And that's what matters. Seems to be what matters. Thank you, Dad. There is, we suppose, the case that there was a time when one's reputation was everything, and people would die or risk dying and kill to establish, to confirm such. It was so important to them. They would have a duel. You insult me, I can't have that in my society, because the relationship to my society is so important. And so it was pistols at dawn. Queensberry rules. It's been a bit sort of romanticised and fantasised is what I really mean. I don't know how real and how understandable, intelligible such accounts are really, but that honour was very important. And it still is, we see in our popular culture. If you get dishonoured publicly, a president can lose his position. An evangelist can be downgraded to a fraud. Reputation, honour is very important. If you come to the conclusion your governments have lied about something, then you are not sure as you can believe any of the data you've got, any of the news and so on. If you decide in court that the witness is untrustworthy, his witness counts for nothing. In fact, it can almost swing the case the other way, that therefore the truth must be the reverse of what the witness is witnessing. So, uncertainty can play a massive role. It's behind, in a sense, the saying that there's no smoke without fire. It's not that you've proved the person's guilty, it's that you're now no longer certain, and that greatly affects how you evaluate the now supposed evidence as you see it. Uncertainties about, for instance, topics of national interest. Reduce our preoccupation from the national to our local. It's our local news that is important because it does affect us, and to some extent we can, in experiencing the consequences, get some idea if it's true or not, whatever we think about it, our locality. Things that are not affecting us, in a sense, I think I'm saying not affecting us directly, where the links are not too reliable and obvious anyway, we just dismiss as, well, I don't know about that. You know, what's your opinion? Did we go to the moon? The rational response is to say, I don't know. Why do you ask? For two reasons, why do you ask? One is, how could I know? I'm not privy to the information that gives me that knowledge reliably. And it doesn't really affect me anyway to have had to delve deeper and deeper to see what the case might be. Has it made any difference to me whether we went to the moon 50 years ago or not? Whether prehistoric animals existed or not, really? There's so many things that I can not only say I don't know, but that they don't seem to affect my life to make them important enough for me to try and find out. And the probability of me truly finding out also seems rather slender, because I don't have enough experience and contact and understanding of such affairs as to make it likely that I come to a very sure understanding anyway. We have noticed that in the last, I don't know, few decades, that fake news has become part of our awareness, much more. It was just cynicism in the past. But now fake news is so on the agenda of possibility that well, there's a whole body of interest and fascination, not just cynicism, but to be classified as conspiracy theory. And fake news has given birth to that. And quite reasonably, of course, because the more you are, rather, the less you are sure of something, the more other possibilities can abound. The more experience one has, the narrower, in some sense, are the possibilities that you let your imagination run to, because such may seem so unlikely relative to the assurance that you have. You know, if I know my government always has high integrity and tells the truth, then my imagination as to what might be the case is much narrower. If, on the other hand, I start to get the impression that governments can lie when it's in someone's interest to do so, then, of course, the whole fabric of assurance starts to collapse. And so it is with spiritual things. My understanding and grasp of the matter is extremely low. I mean, for all of us, of course. We are so finite and localized and so unknowing that our imagination is extremely free as to what could be the case. You know, there could be heaven and hell. There could be oblivion, and one doesn't know. So we are pushed to thinking, well, what would we prefer? Shall I act now as though this preference is the case? Which would be, in some sense, my conceived ideal in the ignorant circumstance that I'm in. Or do I act as though something horrible is the case? Well, acting as though something horrible is the case is probably extremely limiting of life. I become locked up in my castle, extremely defensive, never dare go out, and never let anyone in. Life becomes suffocating, really. Becomes death, in fact. So I choose to believe something more expansive, limited by my experience of what happens when I do so. You know, when I jump off a cliff to see if I can fly and find that I can't, well, that's the end of that. As I notice other people doing it, I might think, think I'll avoid doing that. Doesn't look like a good idea. Not much point in imagining the fun of jumping off cliffs. Some people still do and think desperately as to how they can achieve such. And they might do it with a bungee cord or an abseil or something, you know, parachute. Yes, man is incredibly innovative. Marvellous, isn't it? But most of us don't bother. I mean, I don't need to jump off a cliff, really. And presumably if I jump off a cliff often, it becomes so normal that it's not that important to me anyway. I don't have to do it every day after lunch, you know. So we are blessed with uncertainty. We're also blessed with scarcity. Scarcity causes us to prioritize. And in prioritizing, we therefore, in some sense, train our abilities and reasoning to prioritize. And if we don't prioritize properly enough, well, from an evolutionist type point of view, we're not the sort of human being that survives very long. Because we are alive, because we're not the cause of our being alive and being and the universe that we're in, we find it's in some sense a gift. We have an automatic inbuilt optimism which chooses to trust in the sort of thing we hope for, because we suspect that will be the blessing. So we might hope for, I don't know, big house and a beautiful wife or something, and that seems not too unreasonable and within our grasp, and perhaps we gain something more or less of that. Not such a magnificent house, perhaps, but a house, and not the most beautiful wife in the world, but she's a good friend, lovely soul. But then we might find that, no, that doesn't bring happiness, that the mortgage is too much and the wife gets bored with you. Oh, that's sad. And perhaps you even get bored with the wife. That's really sad. I think you could control that, but you can't really control her not getting bored with you. Or the mortgage interest rate going sky high for some reason, oil crisis or something. And you start to think, perhaps my trust should be in something else. And so we learn. And you may come to a conclusion, well, perhaps there's some ultimate I could put my trust in. What's it like if I do that? Well, taste and see. Oh no, I couldn't risk that. Well, you can, actually. The more you focus on all that's good in your life, the more optimistic you'll be about just how good life could be and why it might be so good as it is. You know, you've survived to this age with the body you have and the people you've known and so on. Quite something from not even existing at all. You have great reason to be optimistic. And optimism means a trust in your hopes. Your imagination, wow. Your imagination runs wild when you realize just how blessed you've been. And perhaps not unreasonably so if you think about it. How could you be so incredibly blessed with this experience of life? From nothing, not even existing yourself. It's quite something, isn't it? Love you, Heavenly Dad. Thank you, Dad. So, in overwhelming gratitude, I choose to believe. And I find as a consequence great consolation and happiness and joy and peace and hope and blessing and a love for what might be God and what might be the hopes of all life. So, I'm very content. That's not unreasonable then, is it? And even if it were, I'm still going to do it. Why would I choose anything else? Thank you, Heavenly Dad.